For Sunday, January 24th, you found the Georgia gang. Topping our agenda today, DeKalb policeman is indicted for murder. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation wants more agents to investigate police. And a federal judge nominee goes down in the U.S. Senate. Some of the stories are for grabs on the Georgia gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us on this Sunday. We don't know, as we tape early, if there's snow on the ground or not. I suspect not. But at any rate, I don't get to wear the tweed jacket very much, so I've got the heavy tweed on today, you know?
Yeah.
Nice and cozy.
Yeah.
We begin with a story that's troubling. DeKalb police officer Robert Olson, indicted by the DeKalb DA and a grand jury for allegedly murdering, let's be clear on that, an Air Force veteran who was found wandering nude around an apartment complex and obviously was a troubled individual. I have no opinion on the case. I don't think that I just don't know. I don't know have enough information.
Right.
I do know, though, that Robert James, the district attorney, indicts this guy and indicts nobody else. Where is he? What's the deal?
Yeah, I mean, you can talk about the politics of this more than you can the substance of it, because we really don't know what happened that night. But what we do know is that the police officer is being represented by Don Samuel, who is one heck of a defense attorney, has represented and has been in many, many high-profile cases, and he says that the grand jury was not allowed to hear certain testimony from eyewitnesses on the scene. And I think that this could be problematic.
Well, I think this is an example, Jeff. Pardon me for interrupting you. I think this is an example of Robert James once again bowing to public pressure. He had a campground of crazy protesters outside the courthouse, and Robert James, he only indicts small fry. In all the DeKalb corruption cases, he's really only indicted small fry.
Well,
the feds have done the heavy lifting.
The feds have done the heavy lifting, and they've gotten some small fry themselves. But we haven't seen, I mean, obviously Robert James went after the CEO.
My bottom line on this, Phil, is I just find it hard to believe that a police officer shot and killed Anthony Hill without feeling threatened. I just can't imagine it was a random shooting.
And that's a good point. As a former Army military policeman, we don't know all the facts, yes. And we know grand juries can indict the old saying, a ham sandwich. So,
sure.
So having said all that, he obviously did feel threatened. And I agree with you, Jeff. Don Samuel made some excellent points. We don't have all the facts yet. And Robert James, the DA, is up for re-election. I think he needs this, to your point, the political point, he needs this to whip up support.
But I also think that it is, I mean, as you said, the grand jury made a determination after hearing the way the grand jury is set up. And as you know, grand juries function in different ways across the country. But the officer himself was able to say what happened. And despite that, they still presented a vote to have him charged.
Yeah, it's been a troubling case from day one. It's about a year old. You got a guy who's obviously deranged, wandering around an apartment complex naked. And all of a sudden he's shot by a policeman.
Yeah, and the thing about that, of course, when he doesn't have any clothes on and you can see his hands, is clearly you can assess the level of threat that this individual is presenting to you at any given time, and he wasn't armed. If you're on you don't have a jacket on, you don't have a coat on, you don't have anywhere where you can conceal a weapon, and for an officer to shoot you dead, it raises a lot of questions. And all of them obviously are going to be heard in a court of law.
Now, a weird connection here. This case was investigated by the GBI, which now is increasingly investigating officer-involved shootings. And this week, the Atlanta Police Department said we're going to turn all our officer-involved shootings over to the GBI and Vernon Keenan. So in the state budget, Vernon Keenan asked for 20 more officers. Are there that many police officer-involved shootings? I know if you read the AJC, you think every cop is a bloodthirsty maniac.
The statistics show, over 180 some shootings by policemen, in the last, what, 5 years? Or so I think that
That doesn't seem like a
Well,
big
you have to
number.
put all of this, you have to put it in
but
context.
no indictments and no...
You put it in context. I mean, there's domestic, we all know domestic violence cases are one of the worst things a police officer has to face. There's millions of these cases over the last 5 years that the
Millions?
AJC, there's millions with an M. Yeah, of domestic violence. It could be a simple call of, someone's yelling in
But
the
there are
neighborhood.
millions of police shootings. I mean, you would have meant.
You know what? Let's put it in context,
Right.
because you have to, in Georgia, if you're talking about Georgia, there's not that many.
Right.
And so here's where I'm coming from. I'm glad the GBI is doing this. I'm pro-police a lot of times, but I don't trust fully a lot of police departments to fully internally
Well, I do.
investigate.
I think
Well,
the GBI
and you're talking about this extra personnel, this extra staffing for them, but everybody's going to the GBI for this and for that. The DeKalb County report from Bowers and Hyde went before the GBI. They probably need the extra help. They need the extra
We've got to get
support.
out. This is odd. We're going to stay on the GBI when we come back, because Vernon Keenan, of whom we're discussing here, actually wants to punt on DeKalb corruption. See, it all ties in. It's all intertwined. We'll be back in a minute.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
We talked before the break about some odd connections in this week's news. We had the indictment in DeKalb County of a policeman. We had the current trend of police-involved shootings being investigated by the GBI. I think all of us support that. And also this week, the director of the GBI, Vernon Keenan, said that he would not probe further into corruption in DeKalb County. Now, he issued a carefully worded statement, and he said that most of the corruption was being investigated by the FBI and the DeKalb police. There's a glaring omission there. Alexis, what about the district attorney, Robert James? What is he doing?
Well, he certainly should be looking into it. However, the GBI went on further to say that he didn't think any of the offenses rose to the criminal level, that there may be some ethical issues involved, but he didn't think that there was criminal activity. So perhaps that's what the DA has decided as well.
Now,
But as I recall, the DA was at least partly implicated in the report from Bowers and Hyde. Isn't that right, Bill?
Well, you're exactly right, and you're
You
right
bet.
about you're right about the glaring omission. And also remember what the Bowers-Hyde report on corruption said in DeKalb County, that Lee May and others were blocking the investigation.
Well, and Robert James, you remember, refused to turn over his records.
That's
Said that he
right.
had turned them over to the GBI, and the GBI apparently never received them.
And that was known, it was a lie by the DA. And you remember also, we all ought to be upset, regardless of your politics, that he ignored a Freedom of Information request, which is a misdemeanor. So Robert James has the spotlight on him. I'm just glad he's up for
Well, I was
re-election.
gonna say,
And there's
being
a good
challenged.
You have a
candidate.
credible candidate in Sherry
We do.
Boston, who is
We
a
do.
solicitor currently the solicitor handles the misdemeanors while the DA handles felonies, but she is qualified and prepared to take on that role.
I would say that television news and newspapers have reported a ton of corruption in DeKalb County. And who is silent on it? Robert James indicted one guy on a bogus indictment involving $300, and it was bogus, and it pled down to a misdemeanor. The U.S. Attorney has indicted one county commissioner, Elaine Boyer, and her husband. And where
Well, I'd like to say-
and this fellow who was on the
staff.
zoning board.
Well, that's right. I'd like to see
Well, they
Attorney
also-
General Sam Owens get involved in this too. There's no reason why he can't
Well,
get
Yeah,
involved.
and that's a
Well,
good point, Jeff. This
Robert
week,
James also went after Burl Ellis twice. So maybe
Twice.
he used up all his time and energy doing that.
Well,
which
it's just amazing. You're right, Jeff. This week, a former zoning board member was sentenced in federal court.
But that was also in federal court. Those were federal charges.
Court. And
Those
so
were
was
not
the
local
owner of a
charges.
billiard parlor.
That's right.
Who wanted
Right.
to turn it into a nightclub.
That's right.
So I say that the U.S. Attorney, the new U.S. Attorney, is derelict in his duty. And I think the DeKalb DA is beyond derelict.
Well,
He has no real purpose on this planet. But anyway, you just think about DeKalb. Murders, you watch TV news, murders, rapes, robberies, on and on and on. And Robert James seems to be doing nothing. But that's just me. I guess I'm up against it today. Phil, the state budget, we mentioned the GBI. What else? The 3% raise for teachers, right?
That's right. We had a lot of budget hearings this past week, and of course that's the one thing the legislature has to do, and it's 24, how much now? Is it 23, 24 now, Jeff? The budget, $1 billion?
Oh,
my goodness.
billion.
I think it's 23. It may be up to 24.
And 44 billion when you add the federal pass-through.
Right.
funds.
I wanted our viewers to just
huge.
reflect on that number. It is just ballooned in recent years. But I think the big news with the budget is education, where we are looking at more funding, and
how much of that 23 goes to education? That's the question.
well, and you know, 80. Here's an interesting percentage too, since we're doing percentages for the viewers. Over 80% of this budget is already mandated. You have very little maneuver room. I will say one other thing to talk about some of what the governor wants. There is budgeted money for, you remember he wants 2 additional Supreme Court justices.
Yes, that's all budgeted.
And that has
right.
not been voted on yet, but it will be on the agenda.
And what is that politicking about, to stack the court?
Well, that is the main criticism. However, the governor and proponents say this is a growing state.
It's
We've
a growing
added 1 million
state.
people.
It's a litigious society.
And we
Well,
need.
remember, he had 3 appeals court
You can
judges.
sue a
That's
ham
right.
sandwich.
You've had-
You
remember?
can sue a ham sandwich.
That's right.
That's right.
All right. I don't know quite what to make of the story of the new House Majority Leader, John Burns. Failed to report $70,000 in payments to his own company from state agencies, likely the DNR. What do you
right.
make of that? This doesn't sound
not
right.
good.
Well-
I don't like the idea of legislators doing business with the
business with the
state.
state.
I really have never liked that.
That's number one, and I agree with you. And number two is, and the GOP, rightly so, has campaigned and has implemented transparency in recent years with regard to ethics. This was not being transparent, and so
No, it wasn't even reported.
it wasn't reported. And
Yeah.
there's a case, I will say this, there's a case where you have media watchdogs that are doing their job.
Yeah. And then we had another religious freedom bill introduced this week by Senator Greg Kirk of Americus. And I don't know what to make of that either. He says it follows the federal statute that I support, the one passed under Bill Clinton. And he says it doesn't directly discriminate. I think it is aimed at religious groups.
It is. It's a First Amendment oriented. You're seeing this legislation not just in Georgia but all over the country. It's a First Amendment protection thing, especially to give the example of same-sex marriage. If people are in favor of traditional marriage, it's a protection.
But
Is there
It
such a
gives them
thing
an
as same-sex
opportunity.
marriage?
What is
Gives
that?
them
They're in favor of traditional marriage. I think that everybody's in favor of traditional marriage. But does
Are
it
they?
give them the right to discriminate against people who aren't in a traditional
I think
marriage? And that's the point, right?
Well, this is just to protect people's First Amendment rights. I mean, you can get into that's another issue of discrimination.
Well, traditional
but this is
marriage
what-
is a marriage of two
Since
people, and
since
everybody's in
when do
favor
we
of
need
that.
for states to pass legislation, for state legislatures to pass legislation to
And, you know,
protect the First Amendment?
And you know, it is sad. I agree with you that it's.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Well,
makes
it
no
doesn't.
sense to me.
Well, it makes sense because the left is on the march, and you see these anti-Christian activities by the left. You see these
What we
ministers
see
that
are
are being
these
threatened.
attacks. What we see
No,
are
we see-
state-led attacks against the First Amendment,
And
against
against-
religious freedom.
And against equal protection under the law.
Well,
Phil, I'll just trump it for you. Pardon the pun. I think that really, for people like me who believe same-sex marriage is an oxymoron, there needs to be some protection. Now, in this case, it's religious groups, and I believe that's who Senator Kirk
That's right.
is aiming at.
That's right.
Orders of nuns, hospitals,
Right.
that sort of thing. Now, how far it goes, I don't know. We got to get out of this segment, but there was some cool news this week. My old friend, and our old friend, Martha Woodham,
Yeah.
sent out the coolest graphic of a horse racing track in an undisclosed location and what it could look like, and it was just great. And since I favor pari-mutuel betting, right, I think horse racing with betting would be fabulous.
it's local.
Not going to
option.
happen, though.
Well, you know what? I don't know. That is the one gambling legislation that might have a chance. It is local option. Voters have a right to accept or reject it in various locales around the state. So I would say 50-50.
Yeah, I think attitudes about gambling have changed a great deal since the
Well,
lottery
yeah,
went
that
into
recent
effect.
AJC poll, 62% favor casino gambling.
Right. So
And
it's-
Republicans, too. It was very interesting polling. All right. When we come back, Power of Politics. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Before we turn to politics, we ought to stay with the General Assembly for just a minute. State Representative Alan Peake of Macon, who has made a name for himself, and some name, by the way, with this medical marijuana issue that affects so few people, he admitted this week on television that he broke the law. He carried marijuana across state lines, right?
That's right.
What do you think about that?
Well,
I don't think he's going to be prosecuted.
No, he's trying to obviously get attention to what is the next step in his legislative agenda, and that is growing cannabis right here for harvesting and for the medicine that he passed on his bill last year.
He's passionate about this. He's out there trying to help some kids who need this medication in order to survive, in order to live. And you know, you really have to salute him in these efforts, and even going so far as to say that he broke the law in order to help someone.
Sometimes it's
and
good
then we
trouble,
have a
as John
corollary
Lewis would say.
up in Jackson, Georgia. We have a corollary. Mike Buffington, whom Phil and I know well from the Georgia Press Association, he owns a few newspapers up there. He has a son with medical problems, and he is growing marijuana and basically saying, Come and get me.
Come get me.
Come get me if you want to.
Meanwhile, there was a Democrat in the Senate, and I apologize for not being able to mention his name because he's a winner of the week, who has introduced legislation to remove the felony charge from possession of small amounts of marijuana. All of these things fit together so that if Alan Peake is caught, it'll be a misdemeanor, not a felony.
Which would be good. Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time before there is the ability to grow marijuana.
Well, you do have to be careful legislatively. What you don't want is another Colorado, where it's out of control, and even in Colorado, they're rethinking how far you do go with legalization.
Well, there can be regulation,
but
of course.
attitudes are changing.
Absolutely.
As you mentioned, Alexis, gambling,
Yes.
marijuana.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Marriage.
This thing needs to be taxed and
Incest.
marketed. We make
stop,
millions
Dick.
upon millions of dollars in the state of Georgia and across the nation, and would have this huge industry if it were legalized.
Now
If you can legalize,
Yes.
if you can legalize alcohol with the carnage that we know that it causes, certainly you can do it with marijuana.
Absolutely.
All right, let's turn to politics in Washington, D.C., where this week Dax Lopez, a state court judge in DeKalb County, who had been nominated to the federal court by Barack Obama, failed. David Perdue, Phil, Georgia's junior senator, blue-slipped him, or refused to blue-slip him.
Refused to.
He didn't get. He's dead man walking.
Well, what that means is the senator is on the Judiciary Committee, where all judicial nominees have to go. And he did not put in his slip, as you say, so that effectively killed the nomination. And the senator said that he had problems with this judge sitting on the board of a 501c6 lobbying group. And of course, what did the group lobby for? It lobbied against some of our immigration control laws that this judge, Dax Lopez, is sworn to uphold. And so the senator rightly said that he had a lot of problems with that. Lopez also made statements in terms of promoting fundraising for the group, and I think that really hurt him.
Georgia Gabio, the Georgia
Gallego.
The Georgia Association of Elected Latino Officials.
Right. That's the group.
But I think, Jeff, you and I are in agreement with Senator Isaacson on this matter, that Judge Lopez should have gotten at least a hearing before his nomination was torpedoed.
Judge Lopez is a solid conservative who's, a group of a panel of conservatives and Republicans sent those names to the White House. Dax Lopez's name, Josh Bellenfant, is not a conservative. It sent those names to the White House. Here's a guy who's on the Federalist Papers. He's a constitutionalist, and because of one issue, immigration, because he happens to be a Latin American who thinks that our immigration policies need to be reformed, he was turned down. And so what that says to me is, if you don't pass the GOP conservative litmus test on everything, every single issue, you're out. You're dead.
Well, I think immigration's a deadly issue. That's a
Well-
deadly
Well, it is,
issue.
and you know, what's interesting, I think both senators are going to have to review who was advising them on their nominees, because a simple Google search could have turned up Dax Lopez on the board of this lobbying group. But
Well, they simply want to
Republicans-
have the 11 million people who are illegally here to have a way to become legal, and that's the stated position of the organization.
well, they
That
want them
makes
to be
perfect
citizens,
sense.
and of course, we have a right to speak out
After
against
25 years, they ought to be. They've been
Well-
paying taxes, they've been buying property, they've been conducting
that. Well, that's the
business.
big debate. That is the big. I know, as a Democrat, you want them as their immediate
Well,
voters.
as a human being and a citizen of America and the world, they
Well,
need to
By the
be-
way, Senators Isaacson and Perdue also this week, we should give them some plaudits from our side of the table, Phil. They voted to override President Obama's veto, or wait a minute, always get it confused. Anyway, it's the federal land grab.
That's right, the EPA land grab. Let me do a footnote, though, on your hearing point. You know, in a perfect world, I would agree with you on a hearing. It's not a perfect world. Harry Reid and the Democrats years ago dynamited that whole process.
I agree.
They've changed the rules, and they have knifed Republican nominees in the back. And so I can understand why this is a little payback,
Republicans
too.
would want to do
That's
that.
politics in Washington.
We mentioned last week that Lynn Westmoreland, Georgia's 3rd Congressional District Representative, is going to retire. And this week, State Senator Mike Crane of Noonan, I believe, announced that he would run for his seat. And with him were 3 guys who aren't going to run for the seat.
That's right.
Including Josh McCoon of Columbus and Religious Liberty Bill. And
I think that gives him a big leg up in that race, too.
I agree.
It's a Republican district, and he's a true conservative, Jeff. You don't have to worry about him.
And we mentioned last week that Michael Thurmond is exploring running for DeKalb County CEO, which I think Jeff and I applaud for sure. And then this week, Connie Stokes, a former commissioner, announced that she too would run for CEO.
That's correct.
She got, what, 15% of the vote the last time, something like that?
Well, I don't think that it was a CEO race the last time around.
Yeah, well, it was.
She ran for most recently for lieutenant governor.
That's right, Lieutenant Governor. Well, yeah, good luck on that one. All right, when we come back, winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And I've got a quickie. Delta Airlines made $4.5 billion.
Mercy.
That's with a B last year in profit. And so I say to Delta Airlines, stay out of public affairs and make the seats wider. Give us some comfort between seats. All right, Jeff, you're up.
Well, you know, I'm going to applaud this week Hillary Clinton, even though she has been really taking it on the chin over her debate with Bernie Sanders. A lot of folks think that Bernie Sanders won that, but she did issue a statement calling for the state of Georgia to do right by its citizens and expand Medicaid. And for that reason, she's my winner of the week.
Very good.
You have a loser?
I don't have a loser.
All right, Alexis.
Okay, I'm going to salute Fox 5 Atlanta for showing the King Ecumenical Service for the 48th consecutive year
48
live,
years.
the entire service. So I think that's a wonderful public service that the station does. And also I want to note that Willie Bolden, who was a King foot soldier and a public union spokesman during the times in the 70s when I covered the school board for the Atlanta Constitution.
Was he AFSCME?
AFSCME, absolutely. He
Yeah.
was eloquent, charismatic, and bold, and a strong soldier for social justice. And he passed this week, and he'll be missed. And can I hold up a book and congratulate Sue Siegel, who has her second children's book called The Wheels of the Tuk-Tuk. Can we see it? Yeah. And it follows her Bucket of Blessings book, which is currently on stage at the Alliance Children's Theater. So she's really on a roll with not only just talking about tolerance and international culture, she really is doing great things here in Atlanta, and she's an Atlanta citizen.
All right, is that tuk-tuk or tuk-tuk?
Tuk-tuk.
Okay, just wanted the official pronunciation.
Yes.
Phil, what do you have?
Well, I'm going to make Senator David Perdue my winner of the week for deep sixing the Lopez nomination. He made the right call. And I'm going to make Congressman Doug Collins of Gainesville a winner of the week, too. It ties in a little bit. He came out against bilingual ballots in Hall and Gwinnett counties. And who wants to sue? Galeo, Dax Lopez's group, wants to sue. And guess that's in the Northern District of Georgia, where Lopez wanted to be the federal judge too. Isn't that interesting?
Oh, I hadn't made that connection.
Yeah,
well done,
It'd be
Philip.
lovely for people to understand what they're voting for.
Oh, I got a loser. It's State Representative Wayne Howard over in Augusta. Guess what he wants to do? He's got a bill called the Too Young to Suspend bill. And he says he doesn't want pre-kindergartners suspended from their pre-kindergarten. What? Pre-kindergarten?
We're doing that?
I guess
Is
so.
that happening?
I guess so, but that's the loser.
For using their cell phones, or why are they
I don't know, Jeff.
All right.
waving their
Let me
flags.
mention a longtime friend, Joe Dabney. He died this week. He was 81 or so.
Yeah.
Joe was the longtime spokesman for Lockheed Martin, and before that, he was an editor at the Atlanta Journal. Good guy, and
Great guy.
known him forever, and we're sorry he's gone. And Phil, I meant to ask you this. I think I read that the Fulton County budget is up 10%.
That's right.
I guess they don't know there's still a recession going on,
They
and
don't
there's
know
still
that.
Obama in the White House. I guess they haven't figured that out.
And
All right,
it's
we'll see you next week on the
unanimous.
Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.